Welcome to Flat Earth Debate, Uncut and After Show. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they premiere, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon, crypto and thanks button in the info box below the video. Speaking of Patrons, I'm going to do a quick shout out to all of you who do support me on Patreon, so a massive shout out of thanks and appreciation to Endless, Flat Earth Sage, Goldie McKinnon, Phoenix Rising 86, Retro Bill, More Books, Cannabear, Fibre Oats, Michael Kahn, Rob H, John Kays, Patrick Gunnels, Banter, Will Brax, Troy Shuker, Harry Blade, Mobile Max 777, Neo the One, Rob W, Open Minded, Reese Pound, Del West Watson, Maria Neelands, Unbelievable Productions, Blue Ridge Ranger, The Real Gabster, Liam Nedrick Jr., Abraham Mohammed, Adrian Quintana, Skeptic 936, Life is Short, Texas Mike, and David Wayne Foster. So another massive thank you to all of you for supporting me on Patreon. I'm also going to do another quick shout out to all of you who have supported my most recent GoFundMe campaign, which has now essentially reached a close. So a couple of noteworthy events that happened during that campaign. One was an absolutely enormous donator, so he'll get a massive shout out in just a moment. But also somebody approached me to chat privately about getting the show, or me in essence, a custom designed passive PC. So that has now been ordered, which I'm slightly lost for words, and you could probably tell as I'd only found this out yesterday during the show as it was being produced, the show was being produced, that this was going to happen. So quite literally while yesterday's show was made, the guy got in touch with the manufacturer, asked them to build this piece of equipment for me, which is basically a top-of-the-line computer with a passive cooling system, so it doesn't make any noise. So if you're a fan of the show, you'll know that I constantly harp on about having no noise from the fans that I do have in my current PC, which is failing. And as such, I've trying to keep that noise to a minimum. This particular fan of the show has said, I really want the Flat Earth debate to continue in the best possible fashion. This is what you need to do it. A good computer that will last you years to come, with a warranty and passive cooling. So massive shout out to Nid Hugger, if I'm saying that right, which is his name in Discord. So he has ordered that, and what I've agreed to do is send him all of the contributions from GoFundMe. The major one that needs a big shout out, who did get a shout out on yesterday's show, is Jeffrey Toop, who dropped £825 on that campaign. So everybody else I'm going to shout out right now, which is Dan Kinsner, an anonymous donor who obviously doesn't want to have his name read out, Rob Huntston, Christopher Wright, Michael Jones, Ryan Q. Vincent, Jeffrey, mention him again, Toop, and Mark Parker. So a massive shout out to all of you. What's going to happen with your funds is they will directly go to this PC, as the person who's gone out and bought me this passive PC isn't made of money, and he can't just afford to drop literally thousands of pounds. Maybe you can, but it's ultimately the case that you who have supported the GoFundMe campaign will have your funds go towards that PC. So we've agreed that I'll send him those funds, and once they reach me, I'll send them to him. So it means that you who've contributed to the GoFundMe campaign have definitely contributed to the PC that will sit on the shelf behind me. And that's about it, really. So that's the end of that GoFundMe campaign, which is obviously incredibly successful. And I'm really excited because essentially I'm going to get to do what I did about 8 years ago, which is, without physically dumping any of my own money into it, achieving the same ends, which back in, well, I don't know, whatever year it was, 2014 or something like that, my wife was made redundant, and we took that money and what I had left from the job I was doing at the time and put it all together in a big fat bundle and dumped it all onto a computer, as good as it could possibly be. And it left us penniless at the end, scraping to get the last couple of fans for the system. But that has literally served me for about 7 years plus as the show computer. And now, thanks to you guys, and thanks to Nidhugger, we've now got exactly the same scenario, hopefully for the next 7 years, which is to say an absolutely top-of-the-line computer that will not need replacing because it's out of date, needs updating, or isn't sufficient to do the show. None of those things will be the case, as hasn't been the case with this PC that's now on its way out. So thank you is the main reason for all of this waffle. I really, really, really appreciate all of your support. And for all the negativity and crap that we have to deal with in Flat Earth, this is the very essence of what makes it all worthwhile. So a massive shout out to all of you for supporting my GoFundMe campaign.
I'm talking about spirit.
Yeah. Spirit, yeah. God laid his face on the water. You don't savvy that little clue
Hello?
in the Bible. Isn't it funny how everything's in the Bible? Isn't that weird?
Well, I mean...
Can you hear me?
Yes, Neil.
Yeah. Obviously. What we're kind of henpecking around here is conscious form without a particular... It's not touchable. You can't taste it. You can't touch it. You may be able to see it on the right wavelength of the visual spectrum.
Anyway, I'm working on this. I'm working on a hypothesis. If late, everyone else decides to drive slower spontaneously. What do you think?
Zach, come back.
Holy moly.
Good afternoon, guys.
Good afternoon. I didn't hear what you said. Back?
Trying to say is it's a scientifically proven fact that if you're late, other people will spontaneously decide to drive slower.
One deck, you're causing audio chaos. One deck.
Right, okay.
One deck. Hello? One deck, can you hear me? Oh, he's just popped himself on mute. Fine, good enough. Sorry, guys.
He heard you.
That's the fun part that we were talking about. Science and things that are what we would consider, according to the scientific method, unscienceable.
How, why, and
Well,
what
what
is?
makes...
Go on, Neil, sorry.
I was just going to ask, so what causes you to science something is when you observe something in nature, right? A phenomenon, right?
Yes, as no one's answering you. Cause and effect.
Right, but
Is natural science.
that's what we were talking about, though, is certain phenomenon that people experience that you cannot science. You just can't. At least not in a so-called conventional way, I would say. Maybe a test can be derived, but not a
Test the science.
not through the scientific method.
Yeah, you cannot science natural laws, can you? For example, one of many things you cannot science it.
Hold on, be careful. Yes, you can, if you wanted to. There's nothing stopping you putting a natural law, which is basically just the description of a phenomena. So it's a phenomena. So you want to science it? Yeah, that's certainly possible. Maybe possible. But may be possible means that you could formulate a hypothesis and then go forth and test. Now, when I put this to anybody in our circle, I get laughed at by the likes of Adam and Dr. John D and QE. But I'm not wrong, and I want to stress that. It doesn't matter how farcical they want to think I am when I say, yeah, you can science a natural phenomena. Very unlikely that you'll have an empirical outcome. You'll confirm the null over and over again if you can even vary something to cause it, or create a scenario where you can have the situation not occurring, for example. So it's incredibly difficult to do. But I just don't want you to say, no, it can't be, because then it sounds wrong when you're saying, well, what is a natural law? Well, it's a phenomena, isn't it? But just the description of the phenomena, a phenomena that occurs always. So how can you make it not occur if it occurs always, to vary and manipulate that which caused it to occur always? It's kind of a catch-22 in that regard, which you could say, well, means you can't science it. It's still a phenomena. That means you can still formulate a hypothesis. It means potentially you could put it through the scientific method. People don't, because it's ludicrous, because it's something that's occurring always. But it's still a phenomenon. That's my point.
Right, that's what I was going to
Sounds
say.
very
But isn't that
inappropriate
why
for
it's
a
a natural
cult.
law?
A lateral law is just a description of something that occurs in always in nature. That's it. That's all a natural law is. It's not science. It's just a description. It's interesting that this comes up, because the reason they call it a, quote, scientific law is because it opens the gates for them to use the same terminology when there's other things that aren't science, that could be scienced, put through the method. That is to say, if you can call the description of a phenomena science, you can then describe something else without validating empirically the cause of it with the method, and say that's science too. So the way QE terms this is, it greases the skids to abuse the terminology. In reality, they're not scientific laws. They're just natural laws, descriptions of things that occur always in nature.
Like hot to cold, correct?
That's a description, though, isn't it? That's not why does entropy occur in that case from hot to cold. That entropic effect isn't being validated with a cause and effect relationship when you say hot will always flow to cold. That's just a description of something occurring. It's the description of the occurrence with a specific example. The occurrence, the phenomena, being an entropic phenomena. Hot to cold isn't a cause and effect relationship, just a description of something occurring.
You could trick yourself linguistically into thinking you've identified a cause by saying what causes hot to cold, and you could say entropy causes it, but that's just a tautology. It's the same thing twice.
Well, that's why I said this brings me back to my point. There's a lot of things that are solidified in nature, but the most we can do is test. In certain circumstances, the most we can do is test. We can derive a hypothesis. Obviously, there's a phenomenon, but the most we can do is try and test and mess with things in a control to see if we're right. But like gas pressure, you can experiment that one all the way through.
Yes, precisely.
What is the phenomenon? Hold on, what's the phenomenon first?
With gas pressure?
The phenomenon that has been loosely defined.
Which phenomena are we
Gas
talking about?
pressure.
Hold on. Which phenomena?
Well, you all are kind of all over the place with it. I've heard hot to cold, gas pressure. I've heard what is. I've not heard phenomenon.
Well, that's the thing. We're talking about, all right, so entropy, hot to cold. That's something we can test. But what causes hot to go into cold? What actually causes it?
That's what is.
Now, we're looking for the cause, and we're showing something that you can't science versus something that you can through the method completely.
Indeed. I don't know what you're objecting to be honest, Paul. Everything seemed kosher to me at this stage.
John.
I keep calling you Paul. Sorry. It's not racist either.
As long as you don't call them Ringo and George, then you got all the Beatles together.
It's not racist, but it's definitely prejudicial.
I agree.
No, it's purely because when I was growing up, there was certain Christian families that would literally give their kids names in order throughout the families. So throughout a family of, brother and sisters, not their kids, but their individual families' kids, in the grouped family, they'd have a Matthew, a Mark, a Luke, a John, a Paul. You know what I mean? So they would kind of... You ever seen the scene in... I don't think it's definitely... Is it Goodfellas? It might be Goodfellas. And he's introducing one of the female characters to loads of people at a table at a party, a bar mitzvah or something. And this is Paul. This is Paulie. It's a bit like that, but with Matthew.
Yeah,
Mark,
he
Luke,
says I even get them confused.
Right.
Paul,
That's
Paulie.
That's prejudicial against Christians. I got you.
Not prejudicial. It's just how it was round by me. There was lots of Matthew, Marks, Luke's, Johns, Pauls, and that was it. They just did go round in circles through the families with those names.
And I'm sure that the Ku Klux Klan just said that there was a bunch of black people around them, and that's how it was for them too.
That's non sequitur.
Yeah, the Bible's full of so many interesting names. Why pick the boring
How-
ones?
How can that be non sequitur when you claim to be 20% black?
Yeah, but I don't see any racial prejudice against me in this scenario. We're just talking about the difference between Paul and John versus the similarity in those two particularly common names. And because they both have a similar accent, I do get them mixed up. Now, if you want to call me racist for that, I'm just going to accept it at this point.
Well,
Not racist, prejudicial. Not racist, prejudicial, Nathan.
How can you be prejudicial about stating a fact of the matter? These 4 people were named thus. That's prejudicial.
Okay, I'm not talking about a race. Racist is wrong. Okay, I get it. Prejudicial.
All hillbillies sound the same.
That is
That's basically what you're saying.
Nobody said hillbillies or rednecks.
Wow. I wish I had a logic smacker.
Yeah, you take the
that
fun
could
out
go
of it,
through
Neil.
space and time.
Yeah, Neil, you sucked all the fun out of that. It's humorous if you can skirt the edges of those words, which is what we were doing for humorous effect till you blurted them out.
Why?
Just something about bloody Yanks. I don't know. No subtlety to any of you guys.
New Yorkers have no tact. Absolutely zero tact.
I meant to say New Yorker. I've just forgotten what the term is. I said Yanks, and Yank is actually a Cockney rhyming slang for American. Septic tank. Yank. So you have Americans called septics in London. You ever heard that?
Yes, I have.
You guys are called septics. Septic tank, rhyming slang for yank. And if you're...
Right,
I'm sure I've told you this before. I got this one from a show we have called QI. So there's a term that Cockneys use for being anti-American, which is Listerine. You're being a bit Listerine there. So when I said, you Yanks are all, you're no subtlety to any of you, that's being a bit Listerine in Cockney rhyming slang. Well, what's Listerine? Well, it's an antiseptic, right? Antiseptic? Anti-septic tank? So anti-Yank, anti-American, septic.
Yeah, but
Listerine.
But if you do a word search, the root word for exceptionalism is septic, so we're okay.
I don't know. You better.
Hey,
it's
it's actually a double entendre as well.
Oh, what's the double entendre that I've missed?
That's two Toyota
Anti
trucks.
means before. Anti means before. Septic is Yankees. The Yankees came from England. Therefore, you're the prime cause of your own.
Oh, I missed
ire.
that. Oh, genius. It's not mine. I wish I could take credit. That's from QI. Oh, damn, that's brilliant. I hadn't picked up on that subtlety. That's genius. Very British,
You didn't
too.
scope it out.
Very British to have multi-layers to what is basically a subtle insult. You see how
That's why
how
I
totally
always
unimpressed
thought
most
you
of the
guys-
people here are with that comment. Tough crowd.
Yeah,
They
puns
taught
ain't
us
getting affected
backwards.
today.
I got the nuances of that.
If we hit the mute button to laugh, you would kill us.
Okay. So I got an email through with a confirmation that that guy was genuine, because I didn't know if the guy yesterday that spoke to me was genuine, but he has actually ordered me a passive PC, and I've had a confirmation order and spoke to the manufacturer about a specific detail of it. Nuts,
Nice.
huh? When I spoke to a couple of friends yesterday about it, I told them, but I prefaced the story with, I'm telling you because this may not happen. And if it doesn't happen, it'll be a good story about that PC. Do you remember that PC that I was going to get that I never got? Yeah, that's why I was telling them. But I was prefacing it with that. But it does actually look like I'm going to get a genuinely passive PC to run the show on.
You are very pessimistic, Nathan.
Me?
Well, he's got to be ready.
Yeah, pessimistic. Yeah, after a couple of court cases, one of my barristers told me I was suing someone else before anyone thinks I've been in court for something that's not civil. It was me suing them. Anyway, my barrister said, prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Right. So I said, you got to be ready.
Yeah, prepare for it not coming at all, and then hope that it does.
No, I think it's great. But the fact that you needed something and someone in this community, even though you don't like it officially to be a community, step forward to help you like that. That's amazing.
Absolutely. Not only that, it was clear from what the guy Nidhugger, I can't say his name, but you know what I'm talking about. It was clear that he'd paid close attention to me talking about a computer, so he's obviously into computers, and had listened to what I'd been saying. So during the show, I'm always backing on about, I've got my fans to stay at 200 RPM, and I've managed to keep it completely passive under a certain temperature. I know it's only when the show's been running 45 minutes that the graphics card fans kick in, and things like that. In other words, I've spent more time on the fan software for this computer than probably any other piece of software in the computer. I'm not joking. For 8 years, every day I'll go into the fan software. I'm not even joking. Today I did it, just before the show. Why is that fan on? That shouldn't be on. It's not hot enough for that fan. That's an annoying fan, because they're all annoying. So I went into the software, turned off the fan so it would auto stop at a certain temperature, which he'd forgotten, because they do, these control softwares. But my point is, I'm babbling on a little bit. He's listened and gone, this spec, because I checked it afterwards, because it just said, I want you to have this computer. I'm like, okay. And I started second guessing it, and in my mind I'm going, don't look a gift horse in the mouth, just say thank you. And after the fact I said to my wife, I'm going to need to get this monitor changed because it won't work properly, and there's this problem, and I'll have to get this adapter. And I contacted him and told him. I was like, oh, maybe I'll have to use some of the funds to get a different... My wife nearly slapped me. She was like, you ungrateful bastard. Say thank you, and don't hassle him about anything. Just say thank you, and give him the funds from GoFundMe. Don't spend them on a new monitor. Don't ask for more than you need. Cheeky. So I got a real telling off from my wife. And then I had to write him back an apologetic email straight after going, my wife's told me off and told me that I'm ungrateful. I'm in trouble. So I just repeatedly thanked him. But, I thought about it after the fact. I'm like, I can just flog this, that, and the other. Anyway, I'm babbling. The point is, he's listened to what I actually need. And when he's gone out and gone, okay, you need a new PC. This is a new PC. And what it will do is what you babble on about all through the show, keeping it silent. Because under all circumstances, even if I cane the crap out of the thing, this machine, from what I've checked, is astonishing. It's like an engineering masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. I can't underplay. It's a completely passive piece, no fans at all on anything in the box, no fans. I don't know, nobody else is going, wow, but I don't know, if, like I say, if it turns up and sits next to me, it'll be one of those moments in my life that'll be like a bit of a defining moment. I know people will be like, it's just a PC. That's not. It's something that I've spent 8 years, because of running a show in a room that I've spent thousands on getting quiet, has annoyed me daily. And it won't anymore. So, I don't know. I hopefully won't harp on about this forever, just about how
Don't worry,
glorious it is.
Nathan. Don't worry, Nathan. I'll turn on my fan in my man cave and give you something to gripe
Well,
about.
exactly. If I can get irritated by a background fan from a guest that's gone through compression in G+, through compression in voice meter, through compression in OBS, out through the preamp, out through the processor, out through the power amp, out through the speakers, and I can still hear a fan from you, how irritating do you think it is when it's 12 inches from my ear? You know what I mean? So, not that people who are watching should care about how comfortable I am or how irritating fans are to me, but the fact that they do, in this case, one particular individual did, is just so heartwarming. It means so much. And given the amount of crap, I'm repeating stuff I said just before I introduced you guys in the pre-show, but it makes all of the crap I have to deal with worthwhile.
So when is this coming in?
Probably take a week or two to build, I would imagine. They sent me an email today saying they're waiting on their next batch, which is due imminently. The batch of cases, because presumably they've got the chips and the memory and all the other bits and bobs just lurking around, because they've been out for at least 8 months, I think. They're about to change the range, so...
Where is it coming from? What's the destination?
I don't know where the place is situated. In the UK, though.
Oh, okay. Good.
Hey, Nathan, just in case it doesn't happen, like you said, prepare for the worst. Is there any way that you could drill a hole through the wall and have your computer cables go through the wall and set the actual tower up in another room? If it's
Well, I
bothering you
contemplated
much?
that. Well, yes, that's what I was contemplating with Anthony, because initially, even without, even if it did come, I assumed incorrectly that there would be no space inside it because of all the heat sinks to put hard drives. So I contacted Anthony and said, what can I do about this? I still need to be able to archive the show at the end of the day, because it's so many gigabytes, for each show, like up to 10 terabytes per show. I need to chuck that off the main drive. So he's like, well, you need an NAS. I was like, okay, so what I'll have to do is put all of the drives I currently have in this computer into basically a different computer that's tiny, and chuck it in the kitchen after drilling a hole through and running 2 Ethernet cables. So that's an option. But I'm in a flat. I'm in a very small apartment. So there's very limited space. So not adding an extra box is fantastic. And knowing that I can just chuck the hard drives that I've already got. I've got, 24 terabytes of storage. Just 3 of them have got shows on them. And I've just bought a 4th that's empty. And like I say, I didn't want to drill a hole through into the kitchen cupboard and run power through the tiles and through the wall and into a cupboard that's in a smoky, steamy room. No, that's not ideal. But now that I know I can just stick the hard drives in the one that's coming, problem solved. It can directly replace this box that sits next to me.
Well, I hope it happens for you. I can imagine how excited you're going to be when it does happen.
Well, if it doesn't, there's a fallback plan. So, failing this guy, I don't think this guy's going to turn out to be a con artist. It very much seems genuine, but you don't know. And now I do, and didn't yesterday. But as I said in the intro before I introduce you guys, the arrangement we've got is that all of the funds I got from GoFundMe, in other words, people who have also contributed with the same sentiment, will go back to that guy. In other words, all of the funds that have been generated will go into that system. I've forgotten the point I was saying this for, actually, now. Why was I saying that, Neil? What was your last question?
I said when you get it, you're going to be extremely happy.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
hope it happens for you.
I was talking about a fallback plan. Well, if it doesn't, and in actuality, he was just trying to get the GoFundMe funds out of me in advance of a non-PC that was never going to exist. Well, obviously I'm not going to send him any money until it arrives on my doorstep. And then, at that point, I don't need to have a backup plan. But while there is funds that people have contributed, I'll hold on to them should that PC not arrive, and then I can turn them into components as I was originally intending. So I set the target of £1,000 to buy not the same chip as is hopefully going to arrive in this system, but two tiers down, obviously much cheaper. Go on,
Nathan. Yeah, before you start the show, this has got to be the first time in history where host of a YouTube channel is happy when he has no fans.
Hold on a sec. Hold on. Nathan, was it your idea to give him the money, or did he ask you for the money?
I honestly can't
Don't
remember.
start that.
I can't remember. We discussed while you guys were chattering away. He and I were chatting for about 3/4 of an hour. So that arrangement was made during that conversation. I honestly can't remember if it was me or he that suggested it. Initially, I said,
from what I remember, he offered, and then you offered the money.
Quite possibly. I honestly can't remember. But at the time, I was saying no. In a way, obviously, I said yes. But I was saying this seems too generous. You know, I do have the funds to buy what I need and just keep my old case. But he was like, well, you can say no if you want to. But I honestly can't remember if it was me that suggested it or he that suggested it. But either way, it feels right that if I've done a GoFundMe for a certain amount of funds, that rather than saying, well, I'll just keep £900, I give him that 900 quid.
I'm not saying you should keep the money. I'm just saying that this gentleman offered to build you the PC, and then you, being a gentleman, offered to give him the money from the GoFundMe. But I don't think he was asking for that originally.
Maybe not, but it makes me feel a lot better in many different ways, because one dude isn't shouldering the burden of the entire PC. Because I don't think anybody like this guy included are like bazillionaires and have got endless money to burn. I don't think I know that's not the case. You know, I've spoken to many people who've contributed, even large sums, and they're just normal people. Normal average people in terms of they're not upper class or rolling around in money. None of them are like that. This guy included. So from one point of view, you're like, well, you know, obviously it's a fairly substantial financial burden.
Don't miss John's point. John's point is what you're doing is gentlemanly back, and it's good. But he's saying,
thank you. If it was me that suggested it, I might have begrudgingly said I'll do it.
Hang on. No, it's okay. It's okay. But you're doing it. That's the case. But what John is trying to say is that the guy, when he offered it, wasn't expecting you to.
I don't know that's the case, though. That might not be the case.
Okay.
He might have gone...
902.
I don't think that. He may have factored it in and gone, you know, if I can get the funds that he's raised towards it, then I can afford to do this. As I say, I didn't discuss his motives in that regard. But what I do know is that what the arrangement is. That I've said. Anyway, we're now about a couple of minutes over, so I'm going to start a live show. Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon, and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon, crypto, and thanks button in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected. And if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter as I get attacked by a fly. We are joined by Neil, Refracted Curvature, 10th Man, Flatzoid, Arwin, and a whole bunch of people in Discord. So welcome one and all.
Everybody's buzzing.
Good morning. Good morning.
Hey, good
I got
afternoon.
attacked by a fly too today.
Yeah, I got a fly buzzing around my head right at the end of the intro. It's actually flown out the window. First time in history that a fly's pestered you and then immediately flown out the window.
Nice.
Yeah, isn't that true?
Any evidence?
I call them Beelzebub.
The Beelzebub?
That's what I call flies. I can't stand them. I go to war with them. Do not leave my door open and let a fly come in my house.
Yeah, the
Otherwise, I'm
Beelzebub.
gonna kill them.
Isn't the Beelzebub Satan?
The runner on the table.
Talking to us, George? You talking to us or your cat?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, definitely talking to his cat. Any evidence of a physical geometric sphere-edge horizon formerly known as the curve of the Earth or Earth curve?
Nah, that flew out the
It's
window.
over there. Oh wait, no.
Over
that's
where?
the
What, behind
distance to the
Richard?
sun. No, that's the distance to the sun.
Over where? Behind Richard in this thumbnail? Or wherever it is.
Oh, yeah. Well, you could think of it as such.
Nah, the horizon's
Especially
not
with
Earth
the
curve.
fisheye lens.
We debunked that 2020.
Didn't they have to use horizontal plane to get that so-called horizon?
Well, they're not measuring
I
it
was about to
necessarily.
say.
If they're using it for an elevation angle, then yes.
I was about to say it's underneath the horizontal plane we live on.
Actually, can you reiterate that point about what you're doing with dip angle? Because it's been their only response to how you acquire an elevation angle measurement from a curved baseline. It's ludicrous you don't. Nevertheless, they've managed to come back with something to convolute it, which is dip correction. Now, their dip is to a geometric horizon. However, the actual correction is, drumroll, John.
It's a differential angle between two flat planes.
So imagine the letter Z, or Z for you Americans. You've got two lines that are running parallel with one another in the horizontal aspect in the letter Z, capital Z. I suppose it doesn't matter. Well, what you then have, if you're the top right position on the horizontal line of that letter Z, the line down would be the line your view in orthographic to the horizon. And that point is representative of the plane below you. In other words, if you're at the top right-hand corner of a letter Z, you're at altitude if the bottom horizontal line is the ground. Well, you have a parallel line with that, and the difference between them is the dip correction, otherwise known as height of eye correction.
Yeah, they're just duplicating the angle that they measured. That's all.
Well, you're accounting for the fact that your height above the surface is your height above a horizontal plane. Now, coincidentally, in the same letter Z example, if you can establish that top horizontal to the letter Z, there is no need to make any adjustment, because the only thing you're trying to achieve is a horizontal plane. That's the purpose. Now, if that doesn't ring alarm bells in every fundy globe believer listening, then I don't know what does.
And that's why Eratosthenes did not need to do dip correction. That's why Al-Biruni, when he was measuring the height of the mountain, did not need to do dip correction, because he was already using the flat plane we dwell atop.
Nathan, please go to Master B and show the picture that's been here for over a year and a half.
This black and white, yeah, this is great. So O to D, with T being the tangent, is what they have used to convolate what is actually O to an unmarked point which would represent your horizon in this diagram. It's just unmarked. The intersection between OH and OT, unlabelled. Well, that would be my letter Z. So for the audience's benefit, although it's going to be amongst this mess, this is your letter Z.
Let me
go on.
Let me give a stab at it. The O to D does not exist. The O to D does exist if D is at H, O apostrophe, H apostrophe. They're pre-assuming you live on the ball. That's why it's where it's at in this picture. Get rid of that dingleberry. No one at sea with a sextant sees what you see here orthographically. No one.
Yeah, because we don't see orthographically. You never see this. This is your eyeball at O, observer. When do you see the side of your own head? You don't.
Yeah. Hang on, I'm going to post another picture. I'll be right back. And it was just yesterday I posted it, and we will comment on this. It'll just take a second.
While you're doing that, any evidence you can acquire an elevation angle measurement from a curved baseline?
No, that's why they're totally straight. If you've got a vertical, you have a perpendicular to it. It's got nothing to do with the bottom.
We get to the
So,
gravity
no,
question.
sir.
I want to get Anthony to cover this a bit as well, Flatsoid. So, absolutely. This has got more to it. And as time progresses, I'm finding out that more and more people are, as you are, Flatsoid, well aware of how this argument is quite simple to argue. And yesterday, Sleeping Warrior disseminated that to me in such a coherent way. I was like, you've got to come on the show and spend 5 minutes going through this. Is your next slide come through yet, 10th? No, not yet. So we will do that once we get through a couple more housekeeping questions. I get to gravity, because it's connected back. And Anthony has described this before. The penny just didn't drop for me when he disseminated it last time. But hopefully we'll get to that in a second. Here we go.
I still want to attempt to answer.
You're answering how you get an elevation angle measurement from a curved baseline?
Yes. Geodesics.
Oh, I could kiss you. Well, just keep that under your hat for about another 30 seconds. Go ahead, 10th.
Okay.
Okay.
This is what you see. This is the horizon. This is straightforward with real life perspective. Do you see that OTD? Do you see it going over a ball? Because you're above the ocean here, and you got to do height of eye to that ocean, because your sensible horizon is a theoretical horizon with a bubble or a plumb line, and it's parallel to when you do height of eye to the ocean surface. You don't see OD going over something. There's no going over anything.
Indeed. Any scientific evidence of gravity?
Oh, you're going to move past my geodesics, or you want to save it for
It's going to
after?
connect back. It's going to connect back.
Good morning.
Promise. Let me just introduce Anthony. Hello, Sleeping Warrior.
Yo, there's an overlap with geodesics as well. Because Arwen's right. Geodesy is where they make lots of the claims. But if planar surveying uses X, Y, Z coordinates, which everybody accepts that they do, then the Earth would measure curved. So geodesy wouldn't even exist, because it would already be measured by planar surveying. So the question is the fact that geodesy exists, is that fact proof that it's not a globe? Because if it was a globe, it wouldn't even need to exist. Is that not a guilty, what do you call it?
Boo, you ruined the spell.
An embedded confession, Nathan? The fact that
That's
geodesy
a good way of putting
proves
it.
that it's not a
And
globe.
Darwin's right. Right, boo. Yeah, from Baldwin's point of view. Yeah, you're ruining the spell, Anthony.
Keep ruining the spell.
That's what this is.
The fact that...
No, but Tony's totally on target. No.
I'll say it again, because it might take a few weeks for people to absorb it. The fact that geodesy exists is a subtle admission that the Earth cannot be spherical, because if it was, planar surveying would measure it. So geodesy would never need to even exist. Take a while to get the head around.
That's
interesting. Yeah, that goes against the model as well.
Right, the globe model too. It's all of it.
Should we maybe explain it for the people that are slow, Anthony?
Well, X, Y, Z coordinates are length, breadth, and depth, right? So you get X, Y, Z coordinates when you buy a desk. It tells you how long it is, how wide it is, and how deep it is, right? So you know whether it's going to fit in the hole that you're hoping to fit it in. That's X, Y, Z coordinates. If Earth was spherical, it would be measured by planar surveying using X, Y, Z coordinates, and geodesy would not even need to exist. The very fact that it exists is a subtle admission that the Earth cannot be spherical, because it wouldn't need to exist otherwise.
That's a very good point. It probably was created specifically to mask that the globe model was originally derived from a flat plane. It's a very good point.
So then let's address gravity for a minute. I like to beg the question with gravity because I like watching them fail to define it. They can calculate it and they can talk about it and they can reify it into existence with both methods, talking about it and calculating it into existence. They do that. But when you ask them to define it, none of them will say it's the effect of the curvature of space-time caused by the uneven distribution of mass. Because in doing that, you're negating Newtonian gravitation, not Newtonian laws of motion, Newtonian gravitation. They're not the same thing. But because they won't define it, they just want to talk about it and pontificate around it all the time. Well, I like to talk about gravity, and Nathan hates talking about it because he likes to just cut it off at the head. I like to talk about it, and that's the beauty of the topic, right? But you can chop it off at the head when it comes to trigonometries and all the star observations and stuff, because the more you talk about it, the more confusing it gets. And as much as I love 10th and I love all the talk, it's confusing because you've got to really stay with it to understand it, right? For me, at this moment, the simpler point to make is if Earth and its mass warps space-time, which is what LIGO 2015 and Eddington 1919 both are said to prove, they both say that Einstein is correct. So if Earth does warp space-time, then the use of a sextant for the globe Earthers is redundant and void because they haven't got any straight lines, because Earth is warping all the lines of sight that you're looking out to the horizon. You're seeing everything in an apparent position because Earth's mass is warping space-time. It's causing essentially refraction. They haven't got any straight lines to measure angles to, right? But that's assuming that you ignore 7/6R on top of the curved lines that are caused by bending space-time. So for years, they've argued about, say, Isle of Man or lighthouses, whatever. They always apply 7/6R. But when it comes to measuring angles, they don't want to acknowledge 7/6R because it gives them a curved line that they can't measure any angles to. Well, when you point that out to them, they say, well, it's pretty much straight. Or we can adjust for it with the almanac. Okay. Well, how do you adjust for it with the curvature of space-time caused by Earth's mass? Because that's not considered. And it would have to be, wouldn't it? Where is that adjustment? And when you're talking about stars that are light years away, those distances make a minuscule amount of difference on the angle massive in terms of how far away they're supposed to be on their model, because they're no longer the distance that they claim if you apply the bending of space-time. But
Hate
that's
to disagree.
I got a question.
Hate to disagree.
Hang on.
Forget it.
Just hang on. Well, that's assuming that you can even measure the angle in the first place. So why let them measure the angle in the first place and argue about mathematics when you can just say, forget that, you can't get any angles because 7/6R applies, bending of space-time caused by Earth's mass applies. You can't measure anything. There's nothing in the skies in the place that it appears to be when you're applying a Euclidean measuring device that we call sextants, and you need the bendy space-time sextants that you don't have. That's what they need. So why do we even need to beg the question or apply any mathematics whatsoever? Just say that you can't use how do you measure an angle with a sextant, ball Earthers? You can't.
Right. So
I
just
like
before you
guessing
challenge
for you.
him, I want to summarise his point. So what Anthony's saying is, if you're to take, it's the best diagram I've got at the moment because it's on screen, right? So you've got a line of sight to the geometric horizon in the diagram on screen. It's this dotted line. And then you've got a line of sight out, and we'll pretend that this is to a star. So this is going to be, as opposed to their diagram for boats going over their geometric horizon, this is going to be the line of sight to the horizon to establish a horizontal plane to then get an angle from it. And Anthony's saying, as we've said for quite a significant period of time, well, you haven't got a straight line of sight to the horizon. How's that geometric horizon working out for you, Rufy? Good? 7/6R. They haven't got a straight line. Further to this line not being capable of being seen and used for an angle if it's bent at 7/6R, they have this line to the star. And Anthony's saying, your line to your star is bent through geodesics in space-time, fourth dimensionally. What we have in our hand is a three-dimensional Euclidean tool for measuring angles. It's a glorified protractor. So your glorified protractor won't be measuring a line that is bent through a geodesic in space-time to a star as you claim it is. So you don't have this line to the star straight for an angle through a protractor, which is what a sextant is, because your line to your star is also bent. Right, Arwin's first. Go ahead,
I'll keep it short. I just want one little add on to that point. Great point, by the way. a lot of points, different points. But about the gravity, look, even if somebody did actually know the bending of space-time gravity version, which involves mass, by the way, an even distribution of it, you can always ask, okay, so what is mass?
I think 10th is about to destroy this point.
Absolutely nonsense what Anthony is saying here, begging the question argument. Sexton can't work on a curved baseline. End the story. So that destroys the whole thing. But they say, but it works. Yeah, because you're not doing it on a spherical surface. So you're already admitting that the baseline is flat. It's not curving. And get out of the begging the question. All the measurements are coming from the equatorial plane anyway, which is a flat surface.
Okay,
Well,
so
there's enough.
hang on.
Just hold on. So number 1, 10th's correct. Number 2, he's only correct contextually when you point out where they lose immediately. Now, what I'm doing in this regard, 10th, is saying, as Anthony typically does, when they just dance past that and beg the question anyway, what they're going to resort to. Well, in this case, they resort to dip angle correction to a sphere and the line being straight to the star. And Anthony's saying, once you beg the question that you can get a tangent to a sphere, which you can't if it's a bent line at 7/6r, you also can't get a straight line to the star through geodesics in space-time. So he's just adding to people's arsenal. That is not to say that when QE typically is the one to reiterate this, and today 10th Man is the one to reiterate this. You're kicking a dead corpse. It's already had its head removed. You need a flat baseline. You cannot acquire an elevation angle measurement from a curved baseline. It makes no difference what you're describing through geodesics in space-time to the star or from a tangent point on a sphere that's refracted. So, yeah, 10th's right. Doesn't mean Anthony's not right. He's right after they
No,
make the question.
I'm not disagreeing with Anthony about the geodesics in space, and if they're going to camp on that milestone, they lose based on what Anthony said. What I'm trying to get to is how a sextant works, because guess what? The sextant works. So if it can only work with a flat baseline and not a curved one, then that right there tells you we don't live on a curved Earth. And then when you look at their books, when you look at their books, they're never getting the angle from the curve.
Can I try to?
Yeah, no, hang on.
Let me respond.
Let 10th finish his point. Guys, just stop stepping on each other. It's taking longer. Go ahead, 10th. Just round out your point.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for moderating. Unlike yesterday when I left. Thank you. I'd like to turn it over to refracted curvature before Anthony responds. I already know where he's going. Go on.
Right. Anthony is answering the red herring they put out when they describe angles to things. So,
correct.
As far as that goes, it is an answer to a red herring.
That's correct. Anthony knows this. What Anthony did cleverly yesterday, right, in his defence, because he knows I get angry real quick when it comes to this stuff, so he has to give me a string of disclaimers before he's allowed to do it in my presence, right? Anyway, he did that. Went through his proof sheet and the penny dropped. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. That's really good. They haven't got a straight line to the star either. Wow, that's great. You must come on and disseminate this. And he's like, I already have. You just didn't get it, presumably because you were telling me not to beg the question. And then, Anthony loves a shit sandwich. He says, you do realise that your first housekeeping question in regards to the elevation angle actually invites them to beg the question. So technically, you are guilty of this on a daily basis. Now, obviously, I've made excuses lined up. I'm like, well, it's part of a globe debunk. You gotta preface it with globe stuff. I had all my defences lined up. But ultimately, Anthony's right. If you study the questions, regardless of whether or not you want to go, they're globe debunkings. Yeah, well, they are. But why are we offering them up? Now, I can give all of you, the audience, excuses that I gave to Anthony in regards to, well, you've got to contextualise it. You have to understand why you're unpicking and begging the question, because the question's being begged. That's why. It doesn't alter what 10th Man, who is ultimately the most correct, and John, in terms of his dissemination of this particular point, is also correct. We're talking about kicking a dead corpse. It's already having its head cut off. You can't get an elevation angle measurement from a curve. We're just dealing with the response that comes from an anti-flat earther thereafter. And if we don't arm the audience with it, when the guy on the other side says, nah, you get your angle by way of the dip to the sphere. Here it is in my diagram. Well, they're not going to know how to overcome that. It's not a rebuttal. It doesn't overcome the fact you can't get an elevation angle measurement from a curved surface.
But that's not dip. Dip is height of eye.
We know, you know. I'm glad you're reiterating it now. But there was someone else in the queue. Who was it? Was it you, Flatzoid?
No, it was me. I wanted a chance to respond to what Tent
Okay,
said.
fine. Go ahead, Anthony.
So Tent's opening line was what I just said was a lot of rubbish because you can't get an angle from a curved baseline, and that's true. I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm saying, okay, focusing on the curved baseline is what Tent's doing. What I'm saying is, well, if we accept that you can't get an angle from a measured curve from a curved baseline, then their line of sight that they apply is also curved, because Earth's mass curves the line of sight, and it also 7/6R applies. So you've never got any straight lines of sight. So whilst Tent's focusing on the curved baseline, I'm focusing on the other part of the angle, the other line, and saying they haven't got that either. So it's not that it's a load of rubbish.
Hang on. I'm not focusing on the curved baseline. And you just switched from line of sight, and you went into their world where everything's curved. You made a nice little switch there. There's only two claims I've ever made about the sextant after reading about it. One, it's an angle measuring device, right? And you can't get an angle from a curved baseline. These are facts. These are, you can't argue with those two things. That killed them. Now I'm talking to a corpse no matter what comes out of their mouth.
That's correct.
I'm agreeing with you, Tent.
That's correct.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
I know you are. But I'm trying to say to you, when you transition over, you have to say, now I'm going to talk baller language. They think dip is this, but in their own books, dip is height of eye.
Stop. We've given all the disclaimers it needs. I've personally given all those disclaimers, Tenth. And if you're reiterating it, fine. But we know we're begging the question. We know we're kicking a corpse. We know that this is after the fact with an anti-flat earther when they've already died. We have disclaimed that. It just doesn't alter the fact, and now I'm repeating myself, that they still want to and need to and will come back with something.
Well, but you guys are crazy to address corpses coming back with anything.
And you're right to point out that. And you're right to point that out. And typically I'll be doing the same. Go, Anthony, as I'm talking all over you. Go
Can I
ahead.
make a comment?
You can after Anthony replies. Hold on, everyone stop. Just when Anthony was trying to get a few words out. Go ahead, Anthony. Then Adam.
The other rebuttal they'll come back with is that, oh, well, that's a straw man, Nathan, because basically they don't want to address Einstein. They don't want to talk about Einstein. They don't want to apply Einstein. They want to talk about only Newton, right? Because within their model, Newton is the only thing that works. So you can't talk about Einstein. So they'll say, well, you're just straw manning me. Nobody ever said that Earth's mass curves space-time. Yet they know that Einstein says that. It debunks them directly. So just be careful when they claim straw man, which they will do. They're actually straw manning themselves because they're ignoring the fact that Einstein is the current position in science, whether they agree with it or not. And it does directly debunk their model because you can't get measured angles using a sextant if Earth's mass curve in space-time and you've got a curved baseline. You can't get any angles.
We don't talk about Einstein, no.
Yeah. Go on, Adam.
Okay, so I agree with Tent. They're already dead, but I really like it, Tony, because sometimes it's nice when you've got a zombie coming at you to have a spade to take straight to his head again. So, yeah, I think I don't think I'd use it. It's a nice point.
What I was going to say.
Hold on, getting rumpus by chocolate. Hold on. I want Adam to make his full point, but go ahead. Everyone else, Adam, hold on. Chocolate, go ahead. Then Arwin. Then Adam, can you pick it back up and hopefully keep it without anybody interrupting? Chocolate, go ahead.
Nah, I was literally going to say the same thing. Sometimes it's fun to shoot zombies. It's funny that he said that.
Arwin?
That's it. Go ahead, Orin.
Yeah, at the end of a zombie apocalypse, if there's anybody living still around, you tend to kind of run out of zombies. So I totally get the sentiment.
Okay, thank you for focusing on the zombie analogy and not what Adam was actually saying. Can you repeat it, Adam? Hopefully they'll listen this time.
Well, I think sometimes it's nice to have a spade to take to a zombie's head. And respectfully, in Tony's world, he's hunting zombies. Yeah, so it's a very useful tool, I think, for the level of argument that Tony will have with these and where Tony's happy to go with these guys. It doesn't change the facts that Tent's made, but certainly in Sleeping Warrior Land, It's a very useful spade to have, I think, and a
what
really,
is the
really good point. That's
what
going
is
to
the
bang
spade?
to their heads.
What is the
No
spade,
argument.
I want Adam to say it. What is that spade? Can you describe the spade to me, please, Adam?
I would say it's 4D, four-dimensional spade, which to me is attacking the nuance of what they're claiming. So to have, as Tony puts it more eloquently, but the description he gives in terms of the bending of 4D space-time really does attack the point at once you allow them, because Tony likes an allowance. He'll give them the tangent, yeah? Well, once they've given that tangent, look at where it takes them. It totally destroys the way they try to align their two models, so they're non-Euclidean 4 space and the use of a sextant. I think it's a really clever point, Tony.
Well, let me draw.
But before you go, let me say a point. Refracted curvature and I will create the zombies. You can have all the fun you want with them. When he went on McToon's show, he let the zombies talk, and then he said, eloquent, perfect, but you had to use a flat earth to do it. End of story.
So let's just do it.
Go on, Anthony. Everyone else, shut up. Go ahead.
The equivalence is like they don't like defining gravity because they don't like talking about Einstein. Well, get them to define what an angle is, because an angle's two straight lines. And as 10th points out, you can't have an angle with a curved baseline. Well, you can't have a line of sight that's curved either. So if they can't have two straight lines, you can't have a baseline that's curved. They can't have a curved line of sight either. So they can't define gravity because they can't talk about Einstein. They can't define the word angle because they haven't got any straight lines.
We don't talk about Einstein, no.
Have you done gas pressure yet?
Hold on. I will say that as long as you reiterate that it is a red herring to talk about angles to something, is a red herring away from the actual, fact that we're talking about, then that's fine if you want to play with the dead.
No, don't excuse them. Tell them off. You've got a machine gun. He's got a spade. Let's be clear about what's going on here at this point.
Yeah, but we're talking about elevation angles, to be precise. And without the horizontal plane, you cannot have the elevation angle.
Boom! Dead. That's a machine gun right there.
It's the antecedent.
Hold on. That's a machine gun that you've just fired off there. Was that Jorge?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's a perfectly functioning human with their head exploding. Now, after the fact, that headless zombie is going to start attacking you. And if need be, because you've run out of bullets, you can have Anthony's spade. And it's a good spade. It's a shiny spade. Sharp, too. Really effective at taking down zombies. You haven't got a straight line to the star either. And that's what you're looking at. That's what your line of sight is to. Not to the horizon. That's establishing the horizontal so you can measure in the vertical when your line of sight is to a star that has a bending geodesic in a globe world. So Anthony's shiny spade is good. It's a good tool.
I like it.
It's just no machine gun, eh, John?
Right, well, I was about to say, it's like fixing bayonets. Nobody really ever does it anymore in modern warfare, but they still exist. So I guess it's nice to have.
It's like a line from Snatch when he gives him the gun. Weight is a sign of quality. And if it doesn't work, you can hit them with it.
You could always hit him with it.
I love that movie.
So should we move on from scientific evidence of gravity, geodesics in space-time linked back after the zombie attack to bending baselines? Beautiful. Well done, Anthony. I love it.
Anthony, stick around because somebody was challenging your relative density in chat.
From chat? From chat?
Oh,
From yesterday.
There's a publicly available link they can join and they can challenge me properly.
Right, and if you look, I'll do it now for the audience to see. So I can move you if the room is full, which it currently is. So you go into the live stream queue, and providing I'm paying attention or there's a moderator, we'll move you into the live show. Make sure you're taken off mute.
Nobody can challenge relative density. There is no counter argument that defeats it.
Well,
are you kidding? They're still trying to figure out a way to challenge his egg They can't even figure that
No,
out.
well, what the guy said was all unsupported matter falls to the earth.
That's because mass is greater than zero, other than light. Why doesn't light photons collect at the bottom of the vacuum chamber?
What's mass?
Idiot. Thanks for proving relative density, you moron.
This is why we don't go to chat. Okay. Any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology, or astrophysics?
Negative.
No, it's all presuppositional based. You can't do that.
But James Webb.
Guesswork.
Nathan,
James Webb.
I just want to shout out Terret 3006's comment. He says, my research repeatedly being verified, trolls enter after 28 to 32 minutes. And the reason why that is because they can only last 10 or 15 minutes, and then they've got to wave it. They've got to, what's the word? They've got to ride it out for the last 10 or 15 minutes after they've been called out on either logical fallacy, begging the question, reifying for mathematics. They can only last 10 or 15 minutes, so they can't come in too early, Terry. It's good observation, though. They do only come in towards the end of the show. Rumpus used to do it all the time.
They do it even on my show. 20 minutes
hold on one second,
before
Arwin,
I
as we're
round out,
talking
trolls
shows.
always come rolling in.
Yeah, Arwin's seen this as an opportunity to plug his own show, and I have seen that same opportunity and got there first. So 115 odd people, I know, nearly 120 people watching. Please share the show. The only reason there's 120 people watching is because those of you who come regularly share the show. We don't necessarily get a great deal of publicity out of YouTube, a tiny little bit. So if you share the show, that's why we end up with a reasonably substantial audience of 100 plus people, or nearly 120 people at this very moment, half an hour into the show, which is excellent. So please share the show if you've not done so already. If you have, a massive thank you for sharing the show. You are the reason we've got an audience, so thank you very much indeed to all of you who share the show. Also, because Arwin's going to do it anyway, subscribe to Arwin, that's ARWIJN, who has the Flat Earth Early Bird show that goes out before Flat Earth Debate daily. So while I do Monday to Friday and then release the best show and a clip throughout the weekend, Arwin actually goes live every day of the week and has done for quite a substantial period of time. So subscribe today to Arwin for the Flat Earth Early Bird. That's not your cue to repeat it, Arwin. We're going to get any evidence from any of the fields of I keep trying to get the one that Adam put in accidentally and I keep forgetting to drop it in. Cosmology, astrology, and astrophysics. Any evidence at all?
Or astronomy.
No. It's astrology, astronomy, and astrophysics, according to the poster.
Boo.
And I've just posted.
Astronomy.
I don't know if Anthony was unaware of this discussion.
I can hear you booing, Arwin.
Don't boo
no, I got it wrong.
Go
Sorry.
along with it, Anthony. What's wrong with you?
I agreed with you.
If you check Master B, I've put the most recent picture from the James Webb telescope. They got a lovely picture of the sun. It's turned out to be actually a slice of salami, but you'll see it in there.
It looks like, but it does actually look.
That
That does actually. Now you've said it, it is obviously salami, isn't it?
Well, he's apologised. He's had to retract his statement saying that it was comical effect.
It's a hammy joke.
I just want to point out, Nathan, that you've got to include astronomy with astrology, and it doesn't matter if you conflate between the two of them, because I get criticised for confusing them all the time, which is true, I do. But they are essentially both pseudoscience, nonsense, woo-woo. So they can be both included.
Oh,
It's
hold
only
on.
a
Whoa, whoa.
Hang on, Nathan.
Hold on.
Nathan, please.
What do you mean
Real quick,
astrology is pseudoscience? Number one, who is claiming it's science for it to be decried as pseudoscience?
I'm just defending my criticism that I always get because I mix them up all the time accidentally.
Nathan.
Astrology claimed to be pseudoscience. They claimed they're pseudoscience. Sorry,
but it isn't. But let me just Brian. Let's just say hello to Brian. Good comment. Can you repeat that so it comes through unimpeded?
Yeah, astrology actually claim that they are pseudoscience. They don't claim. They actually claim they're not science.
That's right. So if you look up the definition, it will describe it as a pseudoscience. However, it does not meet the definition of pseudoscience. So what's pseudoscience?
It's the process of, what is it now? Pseudoscience is where you fail to adhere to scientific method, but claim that you are adhering to it by being scientific.
Perfect. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Falsely claiming.
A false claim of science where an adherence to the scientific method has not taken place. I've just defined it myself. I haven't read that from something. That is the definition. If you want to look it up, that's what pseudoscience is. Well said, Anthony. So
it's actually just fraud.
Say again?
It's actually just fraud.
Well, no, that's not fair, because astrology doesn't claim.
I was just getting there. I was just getting there. Right. What?
Can you say that again?
To meet the definition of pseudoscience, you've got to be claiming to be a science falsely. So I asked Anthony, at what point and who is saying astrology is science? Who's making that claim for us to declare it as pseudoscience?
I reckon I could get away with a few name drops here. Who was it? No. Russell? What was that guy?
No, Russell Grant is a good example. Right? None of these people claim that what they're doing. If you go to Wikipedia and ask for a definition of astrology, Wikipedia will say that they claim they are pseudoscience, which is a nonsensical statement. Nobody would claim. You can't claim you're a pseudoscience. It's a false. It's an accusation put to you if you make a false claim of science. Right? Astrologers don't. It's not a science. It's a reading of the stars, isn't it? In terms of spiritual matters and etheric matters. So it doesn't claim to have any link to science. Anybody that's doing astrology isn't claiming science. Wikipedia may try to label it as a pseudoscience, but they don't make the claim of science. So to me, it's a false accusation that you can't level against it. Look.
Okay, so what would be the adjective then? If it's not pseudoscience, what is astrology?
It's in the title.
Wait, hold on.
It's the logic.
If you're self-claiming that you're pseudoscience, technically you're not pseudoscience, because pseudoscience is claiming that you're science when you're not. But if you're claiming that you're pseudoscience, you're already stating that you're not science.
Correct.
So then what is the
wouldn't it fall under the category of divination?
Let's not worry about that.
Well,
no, it wouldn't
there's a
fall under
reason why it's named
divination.
a
Absolutely
pseudoscience.
not. It's the logic of the stars. What are their movements? Now, in more recent times, we get given Mystic Meg and You'll Meet a Tall Dark Stranger called astrology. Now, that is a bastardization of what is actually occurring, and that part of astrology is detailed by Mystic Meg, where the stars will be. Well, how does she know where the stars will be? Well, because the astrologers have studied the logic and movement of the stars. How do we know about epicycles? Well, that's the logic of the stars. So that is astrology turned into nonsense, so we don't track the patterns of the stars. We listen to black holes, bending space-time, quasars, binary stars. That's what we are told to pay attention to in the stars, not their cyclical movements. Their cyclical movements are then demonized into witchcraft and predicting the future. Well, it's not. It's just predicting a pattern that will come around again. The bit where they strap on You'll Meet a Tall Dark Stranger is the nonsense. And when they say it's pseudoscience, they want to demonize it with that as the idea of what they're talking about being the prevalent idea when they call it pseudoscience. So that at no stage do you ever appreciate that all it really is what we're using for celestial navigation. How do we have an almanac? Well, because we studied the logic of the stars. Not the naming of them, not calling it the pillars of creation and colouring it in. That's not astrology. But the logic and useful nature of that method gives us navigation. So, with that in mind, and the deception we discover here daily in that particular area of our life, the sky, why would it be necessary to demonize what is simply the logic of the movement of the heavens and praise the naming and colouring in of the heavens and giving it cinematography of the heavens? Why would that be called actual science? Finally, I get to my main point, and I'm going to stress it again because I've been so long getting there. They call astronaming astronomy science. Science whether you like it or not. No, it bloody isn't. That's the very definition of pseudoscience. A claim of science that has not been through the method. Do you think calling something a quasar or a black hole is putting a cause and effect relationship through the scientific method. Absolutely not. But they call it science, don't they? So the astronomy very much meets the definition of pseudoscience. And when you look up Wikipedia's description of astrology, they overtly state that it is self-professed to be pseudoscience. So ask about face nonsense to take you away from looking at the patterns of the sky that govern your life. The very literal movement of the day and night has been denied to you. There we go. I'm done with my rant. It's important stuff.
That last bit was the important bit. When we'll argue about astrology, whether it is or it isn't, but we accept that astronomy is a science, where in actual fact, that's the bit that is the pseudoscience, because that's the one that's purporting to be science from academia, with no science to back it up.
Put my screen on, please, Nathan.
I have.
I want you to address this, because this is countering what you're. This is not my position. This is just what they're countering. Astrology.
This is my point, Tony. In terms of astrology, what astrology is that you're about to make. This is the point I was trying to make. So sorry to interrupt, but yeah.
It's a range of divinatory practices recognized as pseudoscientific since the 18th century that claim to discern information about human affairs, terrestrial events by studying the apparent positions of objects. So it is saying that astrology is pseudoscience.
Yeah,
expressly.
That's the false bit, isn't it? This is the point I was making. Look. Astrology is claiming to be a divination practice. It's not claiming to be a science. But when you go to Wikipedia, they make this nonsensical statement that it recognises that it is a pseudoscience, which is a bastardisation of the definition in of itself, as Chocolate highlighted, yeah? It's not claiming to be that. Look at what it's claiming to do. It's claiming to divine the best time to do things, the best time to plant seeds, the best time to maybe ask your wife to marry you, based upon the positions of the stars, yeah? And their etheric effect on humanity and nature. That's what astrology does. There's no science in there.
No,
So
that's
are
the
they-
inference
are
people
they-
take from
aren't they
astrology.
making-
No, that's the new reincarnation of what astrology has become. Now, while people may have taken the logic of the stars and then used that information to determine when the best time to plant seeds was, and that was then loosely connected back to the logic of the stars, then that process has become the end result and description of what we accept as astrology today. Only the end bit. So the loose connection to, well, we've got this information from the stars, most people brush over when they read Mystic Meg in the paper. What they focus on is the time to plant seeds is you'll meet a tall, dark stranger. That's how that has evolved. Like I say, it might have had some, probably a high degree actually, of value when you talk about knowing when to do things by what time of year it is. So what's Adam actually saying? If I break it down, he's saying it's a good time to plant seeds before it all goes frosty and all goes, so that they can grow when the sun comes out. You know, when they're planting the seeds and muck spreading. What sort of time is that? Is it middle of summer? No, it is not. Well, those patterns and seasons are what happens in the sky. We're just giving it in autumn, summer, spring. We get it broken down into the seasons, and then we get given a watch and a calendar and 12 months and 4 weeks cycles at 28 days, lunar, are ignored. You might get it on your pay cycle, ask yourself why, but ultimately those patterns are ignored. We don't have a lunar cycle, we have a calendar month. Not a month, a month. Something very different. Well, those cycles would be apparent in your life if you were consciously watching those patterns. That's astrology.
There is another way to view this, Nathan. The other way to view this is if they're using astrology, if pseudoscience is using astrology as a sacrificial lamb to push under the bus, if they can make you think that astrology is pseudoscience when it doesn't claim to be science in the first place, it adds credibility to their own position. So it seems to be a sacrificial lamb, in my opinion.
Absolutely correct. Excellent analysis. Yes.
Hold on, there's something else too.
That's what I was trying to say.
Let Brian go
sorry.
first. He was trying to get a word in.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead,
didn't get
Brian,
to say
then
this.
I'll-
I couldn't get in since I said that the astrology claimed to be pseudoscience because everyone was talking about it. But I wanted to add that the reason that they claim to be pseudoscience openly is because the likes of astronomy and cosmology was down their neck. Say, prove your stuff scientifically. You know, the cheek of it, cosmology and astronomy, you know, astrophysics, prove your stuff scientifically. And they weren't claiming to be science. So now they claim to be pseudoscience. So, you know, eventually astrology had to become pseudoscience, even though they weren't claiming to be science, just to get the likes of them away from them. Yet Kepler, Brahe, Galileo, all these people, famous people, they were all astrologers. But yet, astronomy thinks astrology is only woo-woo. So,
But yeah, Brahe, for example, was he was objecting to the notion of the stars and their distances when you assumed the R value and then apply Kepler's laws of interplanetary motion. And you end up with the stars being objectionable, according to Brahe, because they'd have to be massive. You know, at those distances, they'd have to be absolutely vast. Cut to modern times, and his objection turns into part of the heliocentric rhetoric. Cue the Earth versus the Sun versus Betelgeuse. And you see these enormous, great big suns. So ask yourself this, why is it that they're enormous? Well, because of the scaling values of Kepler. That's why. Not because they are. Because there's a necessity highlighted by Brahe, an astrologer.
Right.
Possibly add something?
They turned a 2D virtual plane into a 3D and then scaled it all up and claimed, oh, this is that far away. That means it's that much bigger. It's that simple.
Well, they take the nonsense, the consequential nonsense that comes from the heliocentric viewpoint, as Brahe highlights, yeah? So the consequential size of Betelgeuse, if we put it into this system, is this. He's ridiculing it, right? He's not saying it's this big. He's saying that is just nonsense. Look at this, yeah? From that, 100 years later, that's fact. They're that big.
I like to phrase it in this following dramatisation by me. So Brahe says, well, they'd have to be enormous. And the person he's speaking to strokes his chin and goes, you are saying that they would have to be enormous. Now, those are actually the words that Brahe has said. Well, they'd have to be enormous. Okay, well, they'll be enormous then. So, in the same way as you've got Newton.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, well, this is what this will make sense to those of you who've watched for maybe a shorter period of time, even if it's only a year or two, which isn't that short, but you know I'm getting out, you'll see in a minute. When I say, careful how much you object to this in terms of your overcoming of the argument, because there's a fairly high chance that it could be ascribed to you. You know what I mean? For example, Brahe, right? I mean, I don't think this is actually ascribed to him, but he doth protest too much about they must be enormous, and henceforth they are enormous. And Newton, well, this is absurd. Mass attracting mass in physical terms, well, a load of nonsense. We'll call it Newtonian.
Well, isn't this more of a way to illustrate how begging the question will never win the argument for you?
I don't follow.
What?
Well, Tycho Brahe begged the question that Earth was a sphere and all the things that they believed were true, right? And he said, well, they would have to be enormous if this were true.
But this is...
Right, he was presupposing.
This is not correct. This is not correct. Brahe came after Eratosthenes. Now, maybe it's correct for the stars, but Eratosthenes, the claim is that Eratosthenes had to add the R value, but we also required parallel sun rays at the Eratosthenes demonstration, because you need parallel sun rays to get the shadows on a spherical surface. So consequently, they needed parallel sun rays. That within their current claim, they need to claim the parallel sun rays was first postulated around the time of Eratosthenes or by Eratosthenes. They're not claiming exactly who first claimed it. They're not claiming maybe but they had to, because none of the shadows would have worked, and that's why when he was going to add the R value, he needed the shadows to work. The only way for the shadows to work is parallel sun rays, and that means a very, very big diameter of a sun. But the sun has to be the correct distance away to be that diameter. They changed the position and the size and position of the sun a few times throughout history, but the sun has to be the correct distance away to match the angular size. But it also has to be big enough to give parallel sun rays. Go on.
Brian, in the book Kings Dethroned, the author states that it was Hipparchus before any of the people that were just aforementioned. Hipparchus had one flaw, which was that the stars and everything is at infinity. There's no way, the distance is way, way out there. And everybody, rather than saying, how do you know that, started to build a model because of that. So it's, according to Kings Dethroned, the book, it was Hipparchus, and everybody went with his fallacy.
When was King's Dethroned published?
So no challenge.
Let me just ask, when was that published?
In the early 20th century.
Early 20th century.
I will find out right now.
So, just for anybody listening, we are not necessarily in any way suggesting that these people being referenced even existed. All we are doing is tying down the current narrative without any primary source research attached to it, just what is currently disseminated as the rhetoric. Doesn't mean that they even existed. Obviously, if the model doesn't exist, then the people claiming to have claimed that the model does exist as a physical thing in reality, that would be the ball Earth, may not have existed either. And if you try and do a bit of primary source research on them, you very quickly find the timelines much shorter than you might hope for, given how long ago these people are supposed to have done this stuff.
1920.
Can I add one thing?
You got to see this, guys. Nathan, put my screen on if you would, please. I'm going to have to shout this video out because this is brilliant. It's basically talking about how the light comes into the observer, and they claim that the light is that close to parallel that it's parallel. It's that smaller angle that it's not worth it is parallel according to them. This video by QNV basically shows how it can't be parallel, because if you claim that the light's parallel, which is what Ruhif does and everybody else on their model does, the moment you do that, you deny the celestial sphere. And we've all seen Tim, what's his name? Tim, whatever his name is, talking about the celestial sphere, right? So if you claim that the light from the celestial objects comes in parallel, then you deny this. Check this video out. Flat Earth, Globe Earth Retards Alert, Parallel versus Triangulation. What he's done is he's modeled out how the observers on a sphere, when observing the lights in the sky on the celestial dome that they talk about, the conceptual thing, he shows how the light is not parallel at all. He shows that the light is angled because it's on the celestial sphere to the two observers. So the moment you hear the words parallel light, the next thing you say to them is, so you deny the celestial sphere, because the light can't be parallel if the celestial sphere does exist the way they say it does on their model. It doesn't exist. It's nonsense. Brilliant, brilliant video.
That's a good point, because the celestial sphere involves a horizontal plane that you're standing on looking at. So, see, this is where it all comes from. I made a video the other night about parallel light rays as well. And a video just before that, people should watch the one just before that and then watch that one, because the one before that involves parallel light rays. And then I tore the parallel light rays apart. But the reason, what they did is very simple. They made sure the public focus on shadows. So if the shadows, right, if we're on a sphere, then light will come in parallel. Right? If we're not on a sphere, then light will come in divergent. And that's where they have this big, huge sun. And then they had to make all the stars, eventually they expanded on the story, and that's why they had to change the position of the sun several times, because they had to make other things to do with the stars fit. You know, Polaris is a monster, an absolute monster of a star, right? And that's how the light comes in parallel. But it starts with the sun, because the sun gives us the shadows. So they have to make the shadows work. And that's what their parallel light ray claims is all about. What they did is they focused on the shadows and moved it, and took the focus away from the elevation angle that was used by Eratosthenes within the claim. To get that's what they did. So that's how that. So that's the whole game.
Quick shout out to QE as he's having a live discussion this evening on QE Live. So obviously this only applies if you are watching this live right now. So Be Here or Be Sphere on the Quantum Eraser YouTube channel. That's at 8 PM UK time. So check it out. Be Here or Be Sphere.
Like this is a little bit majoring on the minors. To my point, when Nathan said that about be careful how much you protest, because the way he described it, Tycho Brahe was begging the question and saying this can't be true because such and such, right? And then he got ascribed that to him.
I don't know about it actually being ascribed to him, but the objection was noted, and now they are massive. I don't know if it's called the Brahe massive stars or anything. I don't think that's the case.
Right, but I'm just saying that's one of the dangers in begging the question is, they'll just absorb your pointing out a problem in their logic into their narrative.
Precisely, well put. And that's how I try and paraphrase it. If Brahe says, well, they'd have to be massive, well, then they'll have to be massive.
Isn't that 1 p.m. UK time?
Who was that?
Hello?
Say again?
Isn't that 1 p.m. UK time?
No. 1 p.m. UK time, no.
I'm sorry. 1 p.m. UK. 7 p.m. UK instead of 8 p.m.?
Is it 7 p.m.? My bad.
Yeah,
7 p.m. UK time. What's the time in the States in the different time zones? And I'll use that to round out with.
1 p.m. US Central.
No, stop. Do the full plug.
I just woke up.
Be Here or Be Sphere for Quantum Eraser's live show, which is interactive with the public every Tuesday at 7 p.m. UK.
1 p.m. US Central.
What about standard time?
Yeah, it's titled The Palm Face, in parentheses, before the ether storm. Thanks, have a nice day.
With that, I'm going to say, if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering Streams, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, though, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. Huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of you who smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, joined as a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member, and all that good stuff. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
What a lovely day!
It's more for me now. It's not what is ether. We covered it a bit yesterday, right?
Hello.
It's hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Just as a side note, unfortunately, I had to shut down what I deem unnecessary. It's a terrible thing to say, unnecessary, when it comes to people giving me super chats. If you gave me a super chat and I didn't read out your name, it's because I've had to shut down quite a few different things that I normally have running. So my apologies. As you were.
Adam? Well, I was just saying, for me, when these conversations start now and we bring up ether, we alluded to it yesterday. There's many, over time, there's many descriptions for what this thing is to do. So when somebody starts with ether for me now, I think the qualifying point I need to ask them is, what are you claiming this ether is doing? Is it something is it luminescent ether for the perturbations of light? Or is it just an intrinsic background? What are you making the claim for that this ether is doing in your, or what gap is it filling? What is it allowing it to substantiate? Because that seems to be, this magical ether has a number of different things. So before you go wading into dealing with what they're claiming, I think ask them to clarify what this ether is actually doing, what's its construct and what's its purpose in their paradigm, because through history there's many different uses for this.
Is it sort of like a filler for the unknown when you're trying to create a model of your reality? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying in the 1800s, the thing that some of us guys are probably clinging onto in the flat earth community is that it's a medium to allow the perturbation of light waves. This was the whole purpose of its postulation in the 18th century, wasn't it? Was to give a medium for light to behave like a wave within. That's its function. That wasn't its function prior to the scientists of the early 1800s. It had nothing to do with that, as I described. It was to do with the realm of the gods, what the gods breathed, yeah, what made up the sky, what was the blue luminescent ether up there. What was that? That's the air the gods breathe. They're very different things to turn it into a medium to allow light to be recognized as a wave. That was its function. Is that what you're still claiming its function is? That's what I would be asking anybody that brings ether to the table first, to define what is its function and purpose.
And anybody that's
Well,
studied
that's a very wide problem now, isn't it? Because
no, because if
so
they've
many
studied
things
enough
are
Ken
ether.
Wheeler, they should know by now that that's precisely what it is claimed to be. A direct replacement for space.
Very good, Adam.
And they
because-
added on all kinds of little trinkets, effects here and there, and then just like, oh, it's a giant magical ether. It's everything. So they are basically.
No, Nathan's correct.
Stop trying to fill in the gaps for them. Ask them to make the claim, what is the purpose of this ether? Is it to allow the perturbations of light as a wave? Or what else is it? Is it the constructor? Is it the matrix? What? This just seems to be the fundamentals that we've still not got from those that claim ether is relevant to our paradigm. And it's not for me, like what you're doing there, to give them any handouts. It's not my claim. You tell me what it is.
Because
I'm just analyzing
Owen.
what they've said so far.
Owen, just one second.
They go all over the place.
What John said earlier in regards to Brahe in the live show, specifically referencing Globe, this is no different. Once you start essentially begging the question alongside them and potentially offering up things that they can insert into their paradigm just to overcome it because they've assumed it in the first instance, your objection becomes part of the narrative. That's why you end up with a great big long list of what things that ether are. Adam's got it right down. What is it? Well, it's necessary for them to reify light as a wave and the medium that it will propagate through. That's what it is if they've studied enough Ken Wheeler or whoever, Electric Universe, let's not ascribe it to Ken. That's what it's needed.
I'm totally with you. I'm just saying I'm absolutely with you right there. That's what I was trying to communicate.
Oh, thank you. Adam's ace. We all know.
Adam, are you, sorry, John. Adam, are you stating that they were looking to explain how light works as a wave because it was being claimed to be a wave at the time?
Yeah, that was the understanding of light back then. So how do you resolve that problem if in the early 1800s every observation you're making, yeah, you're seeing light behave as a wave. You can see this wave function. So all you've got is that assumption that it's a wave. Well, even back then, they knew that a wave is something that happens in something. It's not the way particles will form. Particles don't make waves individually. You can have a bunch of things to make a wave, or you can have a reaction of a medium to make a wave. So that's their assumption, that because they're seeing wave-like mechanics, there must be a medium for this wave to be occurring in. Right, what is it? It's the ether. It's the luminiferous ether, yeah? Because it's to do with the perturbations of light. Yeah? So it's an illogical conclusion. Well, it's an assumption based on the observations. But it's a void filling, isn't it? It's a void filling through lack
It's an
of knowledge.
aberration. That's what I call an aberration, like an unresolvable need to connect these things into some kind of unity, but at the core there's nothing, just like with gravity.
Because it's based on the premise that light is a wave. Now, if light is a wave, it needs a medium for the wave to perturbate in. That's what the wave is, yeah? So it's a false assumption that leads you down to a route that you have to have this thing that you can't detect for the light to behave like a wave in, yeah? So it's just based on the faulty assumption. And it's a bit like what we said with Brahe. It's a bit like with Newton. You say one thing, well, if that's the case, it'd have to be this, wouldn't it? Well, well, there we go then, and it must be. Whether that's, yeah, all of those things, and ether is the same thing. Oh, well, light's definitely a wave because we can see it behave and demonstrate these wave things, so therefore there must be an ether for this effect to occur.
Right, we need to assume this to move on, so let's just go there.
Because it can't be
das
nothing.
habe ich auch gesehen. Bro, ich kam nicht klar. Bro, ich schreibe ihn, er schickt mir ein Foto.
Eric, thank you for that.
Yeah, gravity is the same. They pre-assumed a lot of stuff, and then they said, what causes things to go down if we're in this big pre-assumption? Well, it would have to be some kind of a force of attraction. You know, it's basically the same thing, isn't it? They added something in that had to be there if their pre-assumption was correct.
Yeah, well, you've got the famous person, like whether it's Brahe, making the statement. Well, if it's this, then the consequence is this. Oh, well, if Brahe said it, well, it must be. And then you've got Newton. Well, if it is in this Newtonian mechanics way, then there must be some force. But whatever you do, don't ascribe that to me. I'm not claiming that. 100 years later, there's a force. Look, Newton says so. Yeah, it's a false. Somebody's filling in a little gap in their knowledge, and then people take that made-up gap filler and roll with it as fact. Because it has to be to allow the model and the understanding within that model to continue, whether it's astrology, astronomy, gravity, or ether. It's accepted as fact because one clever person assumed it once, so we'll all move on from there.
The way you put it like that, it almost sounds...
Hold on. I just want to give proper credit because the first person that said it was a gap filler that I heard was Betty, the owner of this server. I just want everyone to know that.
Said what?
Know what? That the ether was a gap filler.
Betty's
Well, are you taking my credit, QE?
I'm not taking it. I'm just saying Betty was the first one to say it.
Posthumously awarded.
I don't know. I vaguely remember Brian saying it at least a couple of weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
You're so
about 2 weeks before Betty.
Me? I don't remember.
The way Adam put that before, it almost sounds like I'm listening to, and I don't want to, because obviously ether is not science, it hasn't been validated empirically, but it almost sounds like I'm hearing an alternate hypothesis without hearing a no. Right? So so if light is a wave, then it requires a medium to propagate through. Okay, but what if it's not? I don't ever hear the what if it's not part.
It's an affirmative consequent. Eli pointed it out last week. So you said half of it already. If light is a wave, then it requires a medium to propagate through. Well, it's propagating through something, so obviously, light's a wave.
Nathan, can you go to the page from King's Dethroned in Master B that I put up after the cover? I want to tell you exactly what it mirrors, what we're talking about right now.
Okie dokie.
You there?
Yeah.
All right, so if you go to the top part here on page 3, such was the extraordinary conclusion arrived by Hipparchus, and that statement of his lies at the root of astronomy and has led its advocates into an amazing series of blunders from that day to this. The whole future of the science of astronomy was affected by Hipparchus when he said, quote unquote, "The heavenly bodies are infinitely distant. And now, when I say that it is not so, the fate of astronomy again hangs in the balance. It is this momentous issue which will be decided in due course within these pages. So if somebody said, similarly, ether has to be there because light is a wave, and then everybody runs on that without ever proving it. Same thing.
Thanks.
If you've just got a straightforward diffraction pattern,
come again,
you can see how that assumption can be made. We see slits and we see a wave pattern forming. You can see why the assumption is there, because they're 100 years behind, 200 years behind our knowledge of what that is, that it's a probability distribution. Yeah? But if all you've got is that pattern, you can see back then it's reasonable, and I say reasonable, it's not scientific, but it's reasonable to start inquiry from that point. Hello, we've got wave behavior here. Yeah? So it's a reasonable thing to begin looking into. What is going on? Why are we getting this interference pattern? Why? Why does it look like a wave? It's a reasonable thing, but it's not a reasonable thing to just accept and then move on as a premise.
But at the point that the wave function is collapsed, then the belief that it's a wave should collapse with it, in my opinion.
They're not collapsed now. So none of this is occurring at this point. They can't collapse a wave function yet.
But the wave function itself that's being described as wave-like has then rolled into a necessity for a medium for this wave, which isn't. It's wave-like when they're studying it at that stage. And Adam's saying, well, it's a reasonable supposition at that point. Not to hold necessarily as true, but as a starting point, it's a reasonable point to jump off of. But now we know better. Now, probability distribution, it might hit 0.1, it might hit 0.5, but it hit 0.3 3 times. So presumably it's going to hit 0.3 this time. No, what do you know, it hit 0.5. Well, that's a likelihood of where the next particle of light that's being fired will hit. That's probability. And how it's distributed on that board is the likelihood or probability distribution when described mathematically as such. Collapsing that probability means that it's a one-for-one relationship. Through slit 1, hit behind slit 1. Through slit 2, hit behind slit 2. That's why you get 2 bars. But that is no longer, it might hit at 5, it might hit at 3, it might hit at 1. It's most likely to hit at 2. It's very unlikely to hit at 7. Whatever. Those aren't in play when you have a one-for-one relationship between it goes through this path and hits behind that path. It goes through that path, it hits behind that path. Well, that description hasn't got a wave at all. There's no wave function to describe after probability has been enabled through the collapse of that probability into actualization. It's actually doing it. It's actually hitting behind. Where'd you get your wave from that? Well, you don't. You have a journey of a particle through a slit and hitting behind it. That's not a wave. But the description of how it hit when you fired multiples thereof could be described as wave-like. So this misunderstanding doesn't get you any closer to the necessity for ether, because waves aren't in play and mediums aren't required when you describe light in its likelihood when diffracting. What's diffraction? You could call it interference, like static. Not forming the picture you want to see. That's what we're talking about. Just a random group of probability. Might hit there, might not. Might hit the other place, might not. The likelihood of it in here is high. What do you know? It didn't hit there. That's not the same as it being a wave. But that's what's being described with a wave function.
Just like the probability of rolling snake eyes.
Well, that's why I said that is if they're going to, because they'll assert that light is a perturbation and a perturbation needs a medium, right? But light's not a perturbation. the wave function collapse on its own demonstrates that there is no wave there.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and that's what the wave function collapse resolves that argument. It resolves it for us, doesn't it? And it therefore destroys any need for ether anymore, because it's no longer a perturbation in the ether, is it? It is particles. We can see the paths. So we can no longer, when we're seeing the individual paths, be described as a wave.
Exactly.
Exactly,
There's nothing.
Adam. That was
Exactly.
my initial
After wave
point,
function
yes.
collapse, there's nothing wave-like about it anymore.
But it is still light. So this whole ether business is ignoring that.
Well, it's also malformed. It's also malformed when you understand what wave function is, because what they're saying is, in order for light to have a likelihood of where it will travel when interference occurs, needs a medium. That's what they're actually saying in modern terms. You're like, hold on, for us to get an interference pattern, we need a medium. That doesn't make any sense. In literal terms, it's batshit insane when you understand what we currently understand about light. It makes no sense to describe probability distribution needing a medium. It's even hard for me to say it because it seems so stupid to say.
But that's what Whitsitt was saying, though.
But no, he was saying it's a wave. The light is moving in a wave-like manner through something as a wavy thing, and it isn't. The only description of light as a wave is its probability distribution, and upon wave function collapse, that would be probability distribution no longer being a probability anymore, no longer being wave-like anymore. That's when you get your two bars. You know which path it's gone through, and it hits behind the path. Not I don't know which path it's gone through, and it could hit anywhere in this series of whatever patterns you're getting at whatever time, for whatever diffraction pattern, which ultimately is then derived into what and how we describe light with a wavelength. Probability distribution.
Maybe they're describing the knowledge of the which path as the ether.
No, it's the lack thereof. It's the other way around. So prior to knowledge of the which path is knowing which slit it goes through. When you have that knowledge, you know it's going to hit behind slit 2 if it goes through slit 2 because you saw it go through slit 2 when it hit behind slit 3. You know. Right, that's the knowledge of the which path. But at the stage that ether's described in quasi-pseudo-scientific terms, it's not being described because we understand that you can collapse a wave function. We just understand that one of the behaviours of light is that wave function when it has an interference pattern, i.e. it's diffracting. Well, when you've got that diffraction pattern, and you can qualify different types of light and even derive wavelength from it, you haven't actually seen or described wave function collapse yet. You've just described diffraction. Well, diffraction, once you understand what diffraction is, doesn't require a medium. You don't need a medium to have a probability. It's absurd. It's like saying I need a beach. It's like saying I need a beach for division. That's what it's like saying. What do you mean you need a beach? Well, if I'm going to do long division, then the medium of sandy beaches is required. You know, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, because the particles are already doing what they're doing. The particles are already doing what they're doing. They don't need a further medium after that to go into whatever probability they're going to go into.
Probability is a description of likelihood as opposed to a description of a journey light takes. It's absurd to say that the likelihood of where a particle of light will hit requires a medium. It's the likelihood of where it's going to hit next, not its journey. It's when it's hit, and you look at it after it's hit and compare it to other ones that come after it and have also hit. None of that's to do with the journey. It's merely the mathematics of the diffraction pattern. So it's absurd to say that mathematics of a diffraction pattern needs a medium. You're like, oh, it grinds my gears to even say it.
So ether
I have a reverse question. Where does the ether go when the wave function collapses? Where did the ether go?
Exactly. Where does the medium go when there's no description of waves anymore?
From James Clerk Maxwell. You'll be hearing his name in a couple days. Ethers were invented for the planets to swim in, to constitute electric atmospheres and magnetic effluvia, to convey sensations from one part of our bodies to another, and so on, until all space had been filled 3 or 4 times over with ethers. The only ether which has survived is that which was invented by Huygens. That's Huygens, to explain the propagation of light. End of citation.
There's a new word in there. Sorry, I like a new word. Bluegens, did you say? What was the word?
Huygens.
No. There was a
Huygens.
No, not Huygens. Not the person. In the middle of the description, there was a word in there.
Fluvian.
Effluvia.
There we go. What's that? Could you say it one more time, please?
Effluvia.
Effluvia. I've never heard that word. What does that mean?
An unpleasant or harmful odor, secretion, or discharge.
I wish I hadn't asked. I won't be using that word often.
Fart is ether? Are you saying a fart?
Comes from effluent, Nathan.
Comes from effluent.
Effluvia.
Okay. No, that makes sense.
Oh, it describes ether.
Back in the
read
day,
again?
a fart would have been ether.
The important point QE made there was what's left. What's the only ether that's left? Because I was been saying we've had many descriptions, and we need them. They're going to claim ether to describe what their ether is doing. So, as it says in there, the only thing that's left is for the perturbation of light in their effluent.
That word that QE used, and Nathan wanted to know, I think Paul McCartney had a song with that name in the song.
Come on, tell us.
No, I'm serious. I have to go find the song. He repeats it as a chorus.
Really?
It sounds just like that word.
Oh,
It
there
probably
we go.
isn't, but it sounds just like it.
Yeah, so you'd have to look. Come on, what is it? You need a better lead for this pun, don't you? You're waiting for the better lead. It's not coming.
No, I'm just, when I heard that word, immediately I went to that song and the lyrics that I've heard so many times when I hear that song.
What word? What word?
Effluvia.
No, you're thinking of Mamunia. Mamunia.
That's Effluvia's cousin.
Boom. With that, I'm going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Discord and G Plus panels for making today's after show possible. And of course, a massive thank you to all of you in either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering streams for hopefully smashing the super chat, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, joining as a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member, and all that good stuff. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
What a lovely day!